Hello, let us continue our discussion on Passage to India by Walt Whitman. It will be the text that we will go after. As you can see, as I've mentioned earlier, that there are three particular sections that is in your syllabus, and let us begin with the first one. As we can find in this particular text, the text begins in the first person narrative. That means the first person, my, this particular term is being incorporated or used here. He writes, singing my days, singing the great achievements of the present, singing the strong light works of engineers. So ultimately, you will find that what does these three terms, this anaphoric representation of this particular term, singing, repeatedly he is using, repeatedly the poet is using this term. Why? Because somehow it is a kind of a structure of an ode, as you can see. If you go with the literary terms book, you will find that a particular ode is written on a, say, any particular event, or maybe to celebrate an event, or maybe to say something about any concept or person or other anything. So fundamentally, when we go with this particular poem, that is Passage to India, you will find that to some extent Whitman, just like an ode, Whitman is trying to give a kind of an overt description of the advancement of technology, and at the same time what are the positive resources that are found to be present in America at the present time. He says, singing my days, singing the great achievements of the present. So generally, you will find that the fundamental focus of this particular poem, at the beginning lines, you will find the fundamental focus of this particular poem is dealing with the present achievements. Now the question is, what are the great achievements? As I mentioned earlier, that these are referring to these three fundamental advancements or achievements, whether it is the Suez Canal, whether it is the transatlantic cable, or whether it is the transportation from one part of America to another. So these three achievements have been taken care of. You see, this will be continuing in the next section. He says, singing the strong light works of engineers. And what are they? Our modern wonders. So he is trying to compare the modern wonders with the seven existing wonders that you can face. He says, I'm singing, that means I'm writing this particular poem, or in the form of this particular poem, I'm to some extent admiring, rather. He writes, singing the strong light of works of engineers, our modern wonders, and then within bracket, as you can see here, the antique ponderous seven outvied. So these antique ponderous seven, these are actually indicating towards the old seven wonders that are present within the world. And then he says, outvied. It actually indicates that it can be outstripped. That means if you try to compare the wonders that have been done by the engineers presently, okay, and these will be listed here, as you can see, Suez Canal and the railroad and the other things, as you see. So fundamentally, we will find that he is trying to mean that ultimately in the present condition, the great achievements of the present, they are not to be considered as least important, or rather less important than those seven wonders. These are also be taken care of as the wonders of the present time. He says, our modern wonders, the antique ponderous seven outvied. In the old world, the East, the Suez Canal, the new by its mighty railroad spanned. That means if one point you will find that it has been outvied by the Suez Canal in the present time, and then the new by its mighty railroad spanned. So ultimately, you will find that praising the engineers for their great works, he is of the opinion that the modern day wonders outshine the seven wonders of the past. Praising the great railroads, the wares inlaid on the sea, and the building of the sewage canal. The poet is actually displaying his jubilant mood. And he says, in the old world, the sewage canal, the new by its mighty railroad spanned, the seas inlaid with eloquent gentle words. These gentle words are always important here. You see. And then, yet first to sound and ever sound the cry with thee, O soul. So now here you will find that somehow the fundamental focus of this particular poem is got shifted. What I'm trying to suggest here, that up to this you will find that he is trying to say something about the present scenario. Walt Whitman is trying to say something about the present achievements, whether it is associated with Suez Canal or maybe the transatlantic cables that have been pointed by the gentle wares, or maybe the transportation, okay, the rail lines that are there from one part of America to another. Now, you will find, as I mentioned earlier, that this particular poem is not to be considered simply as a descriptive poem that commemorates, or rather that celebrates, the present advancements. Rather, we must say that the poem is being associated with something spiritual, and here lies the transcendental forms. He says, yet, that means in spite of the achievements that are present, first to sound and ever sound the cry with thee, O soul. That means, okay, I am very much satisfied with my present scenario, but ultimately something is crying within my soul. The soul of the cry is there. And what is that? The past, the past, the past. It is not to be negated. So past is always important here. It is not simply the present that is important. Rather, you must say that the past is important here. And the same orientation continues. He says, the past, the dark, unfathomed retrospect. What does the term mean? Retrospect, it means that when we are at present, we must to look back. It's a kind of a retrospection that is needed. Retrospection can make you able to think the importance of the past on present. It is needed, you see, because only looking at the past, you can find how the present is constructed out of the past, or how past is important to construct the present. And you know, here it says the past, the dark, because it is completely ignorant to us, it is not completely being illumined, and unfathomed. The term fathom is associated with a distance marking in the, or say, in the nautical fields, you see. In the ships and seas, the fathom, this particular term is being used to measure the depth of water. He says it's unfathomed. That means you cannot measure its importance. You cannot measure its level, how much importance the past is. So here he says the past, the dark, unfathomed retrospect, the teeming gulf, the sleepers and the shadows. So everywhere these non-distinct forms have been incorporated here. The gulf is teeming, the sleepers and the shadows are always there. The past, the infinite greatness of the past. So ultimately in these lines, you will find that the past is being powerfully being striven. The past, this very term, has been repeatedly used. So do you think that the fundamental focus of this particular poem is simply the present? No. Rather, the past is also important that he is trying here. He says the past, the dark, unfathomed retrospect, the teeming girl, the sleepers, the shadows, the past, the infinite greatness of the past. For what is the present, after all, but a growth out of the past? That is the thing that I am trying to suggest here. That he is with the view that present is the byproduct of the past. If you erase the past, if you erase the history, then ultimately there is no longer remain the importance of the present. So that's why he says, for what is the present after all but a growth out of the past? Here read the term but as except, except, except. So what is present after all except a growth out of the past? Apart from that, apart from, if you know what I am, it is the sum total of what I have experienced. And if you erase the experience of one particular community, if you erase the particular history of one particular nation, then ultimately you will find that the nation doesn't have anything of its own. You see, that when the colonial exploitations are there, if you read colonialism, if you read the colonial implications or colonial effects, rather the effects on any particular colonized country, then you will find a particular term is being always in use, that is called eraser. You know, it is the colonial problem that the colonist always tries to erase the history of the native land. Okay, so somehow that's why whenever you will, when you think of America or when you think of India, say, you will find that India was a country full of glorifications. How do you know? Just because you have a long history, you have a cultural heritage. And if the past was being erased, then there is nothing left. That is the fundamental thing. And here also, Walt Whitman is trying to mean this same thing. He says, the past, the infinite greatness of the past. For what is the present after all but a growth out of the past? As a projectile, as you see, formed, impelled, passing a certain line, still keeps on, so the present utterly formed, impelled by the past. So ultimately, if you think of a projectile, it is formed, it is impelled, and it is passing a certain line. So ultimately, you will find the traces are there. And still you will find it is keeping on. Still you will find that it is going on or moving on. Just like that, if you think in terms of the present, you will find it is utterly formed and ultimately these are impelled by the past. So present is also kind of like a projectile. And you will find that from the past, it is coming to the present, and from the present, it will go to the future. It's a kind of a continuous line. So whenever you will celebrate the present, it is not that you can negate the importance of the past or importance of history, importance of your cultural heritage, and then you will think, okay, this is happening at the present time. So that is the fundamental thing of the first stanza of Passage to India that is propounded by Walt Whitman here. We will continue our discussion in our next lectures. Thank you.